Russie, where we are, the Institute, has always really been rooted in military history. The Duke of Wellington founded the Institute to promote thinking about the military art, and promoting discussion, debate, and writing about strategy, war, and conflict has been important to the Institute ever since. I've always rather liked the historian of war Barbara Tuchman's quote, "Nothing so comforts the military mind as the maxim of a great but dead general." But actually, if you think of Wellington, he left us a great many telling maxims. I'm not thinking there of the playing fields of Eton and Waterloo. He never said it. The 7th Duke wrote to the Times some years ago that during his old age, Wellington was recorded to have visited Eton on only 2 occasions only, and it's unlikely he came more often. His career at Eton was short and inglorious, and quite apart from the fact that the authority for attributing the words to Wellington is of the flimsiest description, to anyone who knows his turn of phrase, they ring entirely false. Which is, but one quote from Wellington, and I hope he did say it, but I thought always did ring true, and it applies but is often forgotten by politicians and permanent secretaries and chief executives, as no doubt occasionally generals, is when he said after Waterloo, "When other generals make mistakes, their armies are beaten. When I get into a hole, my men pull me out of it." It is indeed no accident that so much of what is taught in business schools has its origin in the study of military history, leadership, strategies, tactics, objectives, targets, and all the rest. I am delighted that at King's College, where I am now, military history is still vigorously taught. And even, I'm told, in the staff, the modern equivalent of the staff college, military history still features, although I think financial stringency has removed most of the battlefield rides in exotic places. At a time when our forces are still engaged in a tough fight in Afghanistan, we can all agree with George Orwell when he wrote, "We sleep safely in our beds because rough men stand ready in the night to visit violence on those who would harm us," and, one might add, to rescue the reputation of the nation in front of a global Olympic audience. The medal itself, here it is, was created with the support of the Duke of Westminster, and this medal, the Medal for Military Literature, has been awarded annually since 1997. We're going to hear a little bit more about that from Baroness Neville-Jones. The award is given to a book by a living author, regardless of nationality, gender, or age, who makes a notable and original contribution to the study of international and national security and defence, and it's cast specially for us by the jewellers Bentley and Skinner. Baroness Pauline Neville-Jones has been once again chair of our judges this year. She's been a great friend of the Institute over many years. Her biography is in your pack, but she is a former Minister, of course, for Security and Counter-Terrorism, the Home Office, a former BBC Governor, former Ambassador to Bonn, someone who in her distinguished diplomatic career has worked very closely with the armed services. Her fellow judges are here. Dr. Philip Towell was Deputy Director and then Director of the Centre of International Studies at Cambridge University. He worked previously for the Foreign and Commonwealth Office and for the Australian National University, and is the author and editor of numerous books and articles, of which the latest are Going to War, British Debates from Wilberforce to Blair, and From Ally to Enemy, Anglo-Japanese Military Relations 1900 to 1945. Professor Beatrice Hauser is a historian, political scientist. She actually worked here for a while in Russie, we remember, from 1989 to 1991, becoming a lecturer and later a professor of strategic study at King's College, London. She's taught in France, in Germany. In the last academic year, she's had visiting professorships in Paris, Saint-Denis, and at the Sorbonne, and she now is here with the Chair of International Relations at the University of Reading. Nick Childs, also a great friend of the Institute, is a World Affairs correspondent with BBC the news. He was previously security and defence correspondent for the World Service and World Service political correspondent. And I personally remember when in 2002 he became the BBC's first Pentagon correspondent, something they never thought they needed before, I think, covering the aftermath of 9/11 and the run-up and early years of the Iraq invasion. And Nick has reported on wars and disputes around the world. Also on the panel, we've had Michael Clarke, who is here, Professor Michael Clarke, the director of RUSI, and again known for his time at King's College in particular. And where is Jonathan Isle? Jonathan is around. Jonathan, the Director of International Studies at RUSI, whom you all know very well, and is an expert in particular on Eastern Europe and the Balkans. Now, the judges have asked me to say they were delighted that the standard of entry was very high this year again, but particularly high this year. But they were obliged to whittle the list down to a short list. And so I think we should recognise that simply appearing on the shortlist is an achievement in itself, worthy indeed of a medal. So in alphabetical order of author, we've got Taylor Downing's Spies in the Sky, The Secret Battle for World War II, Max Hastings, All Hell Let Loose, The World at War, 1939-45, John Lewis Gaddis's George F. Kennan, An American Life, Paul Preston, The Spanish Holocaust, Inquisition and Extermination in 20th Century Spain, Gary Sheffield, The Chief, Douglas Haig and the British Army, and finally David Stevenson, With Our Backs to the Wall, Victory and Defeat in 1918. My congratulations to all who made it to the shortlist, Pauline. Well, we come to the crux of the evening, and the envelope was waiting for me. So I will say it is Sir Max Hastings for his book, All Hell Let Loose.
Thank you so much, David.
And I should add, before asking Max to say a few words, that this is the second time that you have won this prize, which is a truly extraordinary achievement. So very, very well done indeed. And we all look forward to reading the book. And I'd like to invite you now just to say a few words.
Well, thank you very, very much indeed, David, and to all the judges. I never thought that I had a cat's chance of winning this medal today after, first of all, having been given it allegedly for lifetime achievement. I have to admit, although I was thrilled to get it the last time for lifetime achievement, the only thing that really worried me is it tends to make you feel it's all over. And I thought, oh my God, my wife said, well, are you going to be able to write another book after this one? I'd also like to thank the judges, who I think have been extraordinarily generous to me, because the quality of the entries, one of the things when I saw the shortlist, that was another reason why I thought I had a cat's chance of taking this medal home tonight, because I so much admire the other writers on the shortlist. I may say that I've reviewed some or all of their books over the years, and happily I can say with a clear conscience that I've always said they were absolutely wonderful. So it means an enormous amount, and especially I almost really, this is winning a prize from one's peers, that all of you here in the audience, you're all, by the nature of being here tonight, enthusiasts for military history who all know an awful lot about it. And I was hugely enjoyed listening to the earlier lecture about cavalry in the First World War, because suddenly one finds oneself being reminded all the things I don't know about. The book. When I was originally asked to write it, that I had huge doubts whether I could think of anything new to bring to the party. There have been so many books. And obviously what one always tries to do in every book that one writes, you try and think, what might I be able to tell people that they don't know already? And one of the fascinating things about having a website, which nowadays, like most authors I do, is you get communications from all over the world. And I had one last night I was reading from somebody in America who said, well, very much liked your book, but why didn't you mention Group Captain Stagg and his wonderful contribution to weather forecasting on D-Day? And I wrote back to him and I said, well, I defer no one in my admiration from Group Captain Stagg and his weather forecasting on D-Day, but somehow I feel we've all been here before more than a few times. And although, of course, in order to maintain narrative continuity, that you have to include some absolutely familiar material. I'm writing a book at the moment on 1914, and of course you have to include things, but I try terribly hard to leave out as many as I can of the things that people know already. And for instance, with 1914, you will not find in my book on 1914, whatever else is right or wrong about it, the story about Lanrezac and French meeting for the first time, and French asking why he thinks the Germans are going to the Meuse, and Lanrezac says that I think they're going to the Meuse to fish. We've been over all that. Everybody in this room, I'm sure, knows that story, so why bother? Let's try and think what new we can say. Now, sometimes, some of the new things are in some ways rather banal. I think that the sort of thing that makes a huge impression on me, years ago, I came across a story of an officer had been at the Staff College in Haifa, when the British had a Staff College in Haifa, during the Second World War. And he'd been a student there, and he'd attended a lecture given by some generals about the principles of war. And as he came towards the end of his lecture, he invited questions, and a Polish officer stood up, and he said, "You have left out the most important principle of war. Be stronger." Now, at one level, this is a very banal observation, but actually it's also a very profound one, and that sort of thing always makes a terrific impression on me. In the same way, I should say, what I tried to do in All Hell Let Loose was to write chiefly about the human experience of war. And I've been a long journey in my own study of war. When I was a child, I grew up in a generation, all the men in my family had been in the Second World War, and they brought me up to believe that it had been a sort of glorious romp laid on for their amusement, and that I was terribly unlucky to have missed it. And that, one of the things my father had been war correspondent at Picture Post, and one of my cousins had been the SAS, and my great uncle had been military correspondent of the BBC, and almost everybody in our family for 2 generations who won military crosses and so on. They all brought me up to believe it terribly unfortunate I was unlikely to have the opportunity as well as the courage to win a military cross. So I grew up with, frankly, that rather Biggles-like view of the war, which, looking back, was very common in my generation, but one did feel terribly ashamed of later. And in the long journey of my own struggle to really understand the nature of war, and in Second World War in particular, one moment sticks very much in my mind. When I was writing my first big book about it, Bomber Command, in the late 1970s, when, of course, a huge number of Bomber Command aircrew still alive. And one evening I was sitting in a bungalow in Lincolnshire, and I was interviewing a then still only middle-aged man who'd been a navigator, Lancaster, whose pilot had won a posthumous Victoria Cross for doing something that more than a few pilots were called upon to do, which is staying with the aircraft and still remaining at the controls after the aircraft had been badly hit in order to enable the rest of the crew to bail out. And this navigator, little chap, sitting in his bungalow in Lincolnshire in the year of our Lord 1977, he said, I'll always remember the last night before that last trip we were on, and we were all in the pub in Lincoln, and he said we were all teasing the pilot, Jimmy, because he was 19 years old, and he admitted that he'd never kissed a girl in his life. And that remark went absolutely straight through me. I suddenly thought, what good does it do a man to win a posthumous Victoria Cross if he's dead at 19, never having kissed a girl in his life? And that was a sort of very important landmark moment for me on that journey towards understanding that war is not a romp, that while for many people there are some people who have many adventures in wars, but no adventure can compensate for the enormity, the horror of this experience. And the only review of All Hell Let Loose that really enraged me was by a man who was supposed to be intelligent because he's a judge, but we're getting to know something about judges, and that's Jonathan Sumption, whom I don't know. So he reviewed the book for The Spectator, and he said, I think Max Hastings overdoes this business of how awful the Second World War it was. He said, my dad was a submarine commander, and he said it was the best years of his life. And I thought that was about the stupidest remark that you could conceivably make about conflict in general, about, yes, war is an adventure, but all of us in this room who have been studying war in varying degrees, and we've learnt to understand something about it, we understand that no glory, no adventure can possibly compensate for the horrors, the millions of personal tragedies that flow from it. So those were the thoughts that were in my mind when I wrote this book, and I'm more grateful than I can say to all of you for recognizing the book in this way, and it really does encourage one to go out and try harder next time. And I'm ready to be in this company and with this shortlist, who's all of whom writers I admire so much, and all of you coming along here tonight. So thank you all very, very much indeed, and I'm hugely grateful, and I promise I will try harder next time because of this.
Those very wise words from Max bring our proceedings to a close.